So the news is back after a break of like
News.
3 weeks, 2 weeks. When was the last time we did the news? Beginning of the month, I think.
Some stuff happened.
We've had various delays. 1 week there was nothing to talk about, I think. Another week I was, I've had Ebola for like 3 weeks now, Dr. Mike.
Blood coming out of every orifice. It's a real burden.
I don't know what else. It has to be Ebola. I don't know what else
just
it
have
can
to
be.
follow you around with a mop the whole time.
So I'm more or less okay now, but
still, you haven't really lost any weight. You would think you at least get
that hurts.
Or grown any more hair.
That hurts. So I will apologize in advance for coughing and clearing my throat and making random weird noises when other people are talking, because I'm still not back to 100%. But I will manage. I will sacrifice and fight through to lead the news this week. Absolutely.
You're like Jordan getting that first.
I am like Jordan. Yes, I am like.
He fought the flu too.
He and I, we share a lot. And yeah,
I thought you meant Katie Price.
Me and Jordan. No, not that one. Just quickly before we dive into this, anyone else see Christmas decorations up?
What?
Yeah, I saw them in Yeadham the other day. Not like the official. The whole building puts up the main decorations, but I mean certain shops already offering holiday stuff.
I've seen them in some grocery store. I saw Christmas themed things already on sale.
End of October, people. It's ridiculous. I mean, every year it's what a cliche to say. Every year it's earlier and earlier, but it's true. I mean,
as long as I don't hear that one song that I don't even mention,
Shut Christmas. Up. Yes. Yeah, we can agree it's the worst thing ever.
Jesus died for our sins, and that's one of them.
Quick reminder.
George Michael died for our sins.
We're going into a kind of a holiday.
Died for his own sins.
A kind of a holiday weekend here in Poland. We've got All Saints Day on next Monday? I think it is. Yeah.
Long weekend.
When was the last time? Josh, I know you don't have any family here in cemeteries in Poland, but when was the last time you went just to look and take in the experience?
Or maybe 3 years ago. I think it was last time. Yeah.
Dr. Mike.
To take in the experience, can't remember. I mean, I was at the cemetery with my parents just the other day, cleaning up some graves, getting ready for the festivities.
Remember there was a period
collecting anatomical specimens.
There was a period of about a decade. I think it ended a couple of years ago. Remember when it used to rain every single year on November 1st without fail, and going to the cemetery was just this muddy, wet experience? Anyone else remember that?
I remember this. This was when I first came because I didn't really know about this tradition until I moved to Poland, in my late teens. And then it just seemed horrible. It's like crowded cemeteries, drizzle, rain, gray, mud. And then there was a few years when it was actually, everybody was like, oh my God, it's so nice. Because like 10 or 11 degrees Celsius, a little bit sunny. And then it went back to the rain for years as well.
Yeah, I remember one about, it must have been 5 years ago, I think. And, I was like kind of, wearing, jacket and trousers and everything, but there wasn't any need to wear a coat. It was, like you say, like 10, 11 degrees, lovely sunshine.
Well, fingers crossed for Monday. You know what? Since we've already mentioned 2 holidays, Christmas and November 1st, might as well mention a third. I'm curious to get your take on something, guys. Halloween is this coming Sunday night as we record this, right?
Next
31st?
Sunday, yeah.
31st.
Fallback time as well. Remember, that's when we change our clocks here.
That's right. Oh, okay. I'll get to that in a second. I want to ask you about Halloween because I find this interesting. Every year, interest grows and grows. I was at Auchan the other day, the candy for kids, little mini costumes for kids. And the adults always have their parties. Half the bars in Kazimierz will have a Halloween party that night.
Where the men dress up as Dracula and the women dress up as hookers.
Well, it's always a sexy something. Sexy witch, sexy nurse, sexy whatever.
I'm all for that.
Anyway, you get the feeling that there is a lot of interest, but it's just not focused. People just don't know what to do or where to go, apart from the drink for adults.
Sorry, Johnny, you're just going to launch into this kind of USian, like the grand tradition of Halloween and
no.
scripture.
I'm just pointing out that despite the fact that November 1st is definitely the more important holiday here for understandable, obvious reasons. People want to do something for Halloween, but there's nowhere to go. There's nothing to do for Halloween.
I mean, the problem here is like when Halloween came to Poland, everybody knew it from movies or from shows, and usually on TV shows and movies, it's all the Halloween party. It's not the trick-or-treating thing. So that kind of, especially with students, that gained popularity. And then there were a lot of people here, conservative-minded people that were worried that the call them the occult aspects of Halloween would somehow impact the religious aspects of November 1st. I don't necessarily agree that that's a problem, but they didn't want kids dressing up in costumes for Halloween. I think it's just a lot of fun. Trick-or-treating will not become a thing in Poland because of it's the logistics of it. Just doesn't work.
Apartment buildings.
Exactly. It doesn't work that way. So unless you happen to have a few friends in your apartment building with kids in the same age and you organize it independently, it's not going to be a door-to-door thing, and I'm fine with that. But you're right. It's when you're a student or you're 20-somethings, 30-somethings, and you want to hit a bar, that's basically
people love to dress up and be stupid. I mean, it's just a great occasion for that. But Halloween is supposed to be for kids more than adults, although these days it's become for everybody.
In Poland, it's more of an adult-themed thing. A reason to dress up in a spooky way.
I put Halloween and Valentine's Day in the same basket here. They're both imported. They're both very big with a certain demographic. They're both about spending money, basically. And they both, as you pointed out, Dr. Mike, they both attract critics from the other side who say, "Oh, it's this is some horrible American thing, and we don't need this. This is not part of our traditional calendar, and it's we should not celebrate this." And it's for people who want to complain.
It'd be much better actually if we went the Mexican route. I mean, I think the whole kind of Mexican Day of the Dead thing that really feels like it's got kind of breadth and tradition,
great aesthetic to the Day of the Dead as well. Oh, okay. One more thing. Well, the news is coming, I swear. But Dr. Mike did mention the time change. This is what's next Saturday night going into Sunday, I guess, right?
So technically Sunday morning.
An hour forward. No, back.
Yeah. Sorry, so you get an hour more sleep, but it gets darker.
So this is the worst day of the year for me because immediately it's going to be dark at 5 o'clock, and then soon 4:45 and 4:30 and 4:15 and 4 o'clock.
The plus is like for the.
There's no plus.
No, when you wake up in the morning for the first few days, it's like, oh, it's actually light when I wake
screw
up.
That. I'm with you on that.
I agree. I mean, the thing is that the time, because right now daylight saving is ending, so this is normal, astronomical time. This is what actually it should be, because daylight savings time is the artificially shifted over one. But there's been talk, and it actually might happen that next year when we switch to daylight
always
savings
talk about
time,
this.
If every country agrees in the EU, then
there's
we might
always talk. It never goes anywhere. But on that Monday, the first day that it's in effect, hundreds of millions of people are going to go, wait, why do we do this again? And there's no answer for it. It's just the weirdest thing. Daylight savings time sucks. And that is a very depressing day. But anyway, we'll leave that for another time. Let's jump into the news this week, Dr. Mike, with, you can hear the bell coming from Brussels telling us that it's time for round 2 of this fight. In this corner, the European Union. In the other corner, the Polish government. Dr. Mike, some real fireworks this week involving Morawiecki and these people from the EU who, to me, look like James Bond villains. The people in charge. What's her name? Elsa von something?
Ursula von Leyen,
yeah.
I'm just trying to imagine her and Morawiecki in a ring right now, punching each other. It's
nice.
I mean, she's kind of hysterical because I think she's widely regarded as a complete political incompetent who's kind of basically got promoted sideways into a position where she can do the least harm.
Imagine that.
You're talking about an EU politician like that?
Tell us what's going on, Dr. Mike. What's the
she
conflict?
Screwed up several government posts in Germany prior to.
What's the conflict all about?
Well, right now, Poland, a few weeks back, the Constitutional Court ruled basically in a case where Morawiecki had presented back in the spring, asking whether or not certain articles of the EU treaty are in line with the Polish constitution, and the first 4 articles, basically. And the Constitutional Court said, well, no, the Polish constitution has supremacy in this situation. And, basically the EU erupted and went hysterical as if this was the first time this has ever happened. Poland this is the 3rd time in the last 14 years that similar court cases have gone through. They've had it happen in Germany and Spain and several other countries. There's nothing new about the fact that treaties between countries are always on a lower level than the given constitution of the country.
It seems like an obvious point.
Yes, a treaty at most is on the level of an act of parliament. An act of parliament is usually below the constitution of that given country. So the constitution, the tribunal here in Poland basically ruled that if there's any issues here, the Polish constitution has a supremacy.
As decided by the Polish courts. They said our
decided by the Polish
national
courts, yes.
constitution takes precedence over anything in the EU constitution.
Because yes, Poland has signed treaties when it comes to laws and how things need to work. And I always explain this. If there was a law in Brussels that decided the speed limit in all of Europe needs to be 35 kilometers an hour in urban areas instead of 40 or 50, then that law is legal. It doesn't break any constitutional laws. That's completely fine. So even if Polish laws say 40, 50 kilometers an hour, then that EU law would supersede it and take effect. But if the EU law said, like, from now on, it is okay to own slaves, well, Polish constitution really doesn't allow that. So that law would, of course,
not an extreme example.
Well,
maybe,
there is actually, sorry, but I mean, and I'm sure it was just a slip of the tongue, but when you spoke about the EU constitution, of course, there isn't actually an EU constitution. And this is actually kind of mildly amusing because, of course, they tried very hard in various member states to get the constitution approved, and it was like rejected out of hand. I mean, they gave the Irish a couple of goes at it, really. And so they snuck the constitution in through the back door, calling it the Lisbon Treaty. And the very interesting thing from a legal position, of course, is that a treaty, as Mike has pointed out, does not have primacy over a constitution. So the absence of an EU constitution, albeit with another name, has actually caused them something of a disadvantage here.
I mean, the whole idea is, like, even if there was something agreed in a treaty, in a contract between nations, if one of those clauses or articles is not in line with the law or the constitution of that country, then it doesn't take effect. The same way that, say, you as a private individual sign a contract with somebody else, and one of those clauses in that article, that contract that you agreed to, that, if you don't fulfill these certain stipulations, you sell your liver to this person. Just because you signed that contract doesn't mean that clause will be legal.
Okay. Well, let's bring it away from the abstract back to the concrete. Specifically what happened in Brussels this week, the confrontation between the Polish government and the EU leadership.
There's another wrinkle as well to this, which is
keep it practical though. Like, what happened?
Well, no, sure, but you see, it seems to me, I mean, again, there are various different ways of reading this, and actually a lot of what I've read in the media, there's been a lot of it in the British media as well. I mean, there are huge glaring inaccuracies in the reporting right from the very get-go, before you even get into the kind of generally held opinion of the Polish government in other countries. But now I've now forgotten what I was going to say. So.
Okay, think about it and come back to
me. Yeah. So,
he's remembered.
Yeah. So part of the wrinkle to all of this is part of the objection is not the basic premise that there might be aspects of Poland's constitution that mean that it cannot, in certain circumstances, be subordinate to EU law, but it's the fact that it's Poland's constitutional court that has made this ruling, and it is the constitutional court of Poland that is the object, to some extent, of the EU's ire, because they consider it to have been politically stuck. So, the very thing that is protesting against the thing that they're, it's a kind of a snake eating its tail, sort of.
There are layers here, I guess.
It's a snake eating its tail at the same time barfing up and puking.
Nice. But the language used, Dr. Mike, the language and the tone was especially harsh, especially confrontational. A lot of the diplomatic niceties were dropped and the gloves came off. And basically the EU was saying, all right, Poland, get in line or else. And that is where, one more thing. The relationship between Warsaw and Brussels has always been, a combination of carrot and stick. It's all stick right now coming from Brussels. It's like, do it or else. And suddenly, the pro-EU faction within the Polish opposition, they're in the weird position of supporting Brussels over their own country, and then Brussels is marshalling support on their side to kind of twist some arms, so to speak. Here, I mean, it's getting nasty.
It's getting nasty. We also have to remember that the main reasons we were talking about, like the judicial aspect of this, but Poland has been trying to, or the current government here in Poland has been trying to reform the courts here and introducing like disciplinary courts, changing how judges are appointed. That's a whole nother can of worms that's really complicated. And in the EU, they haven't really liked some of those changes. Understandable in some regards, and the whole idea though is that Poland says like you have no right to interject here or intervene, and the EU has been saying like, well, this is going against the rule of law, and then the question is like, well, what is the definition of rule of law?
Is anybody else kind of amused by the the spectacle of Brussels, these unelected career bureaucrats lecturing a democratically elected government on democratic norms.
Actually, and that's part of the issue here, because what the Constitutional Court in Poland here basically said was that if we didn't give these specific powers to these institutions in the EU, they don't have the competency to discuss or influence these issues here in Poland. So there's a discussion here of like creep of what's it called? Competency creep. So like we create an institution in the EU that is allowed to deal with these things, and then it itself decides that it can do even more. Kind of like in the US, the Congress, Senate has certain powers when it comes to legislation. And then they create these, say, departments that like, okay, we're not going to create 1,000 laws about this. We're going to create this one department that deals with all these issues. And then this department then introduces new regulations, which Congress never directly
One more thing on this topic before we move on. What do you make of the automatic default in Brussels, the automatic default to, okay, if you don't do this, we're going to cut you off financially. That's always the first step in any argument. Okay, Poland, we're going to withhold funds.
You know, for me, it's like then Poland shouldn't be getting in a situation where it depends on funds for the EU to begin with. Then it's kind of like
what other reason is there to be in the EU? I know we're getting off topic here, but
the whole concept of the EU.
If it's not about money, what is it about?
The whole concept of the EU to begin with was, you know, open markets, standards that everybody could agree on, stuff like that, and then slowly became more about integration politically, which a lot of people didn't realize. But if they did, they might not be so keen on to begin with. Because, yeah, I like the idea of like I can start a business here in Poland that can trade with somebody in Germany or in France without too much red tape. But instead, they've introduced more red tape and it's become more political. And they've tried to kind of move the seats of political power from respective capitals of all these sovereign nations into the actual European kind of, you know, if it's Brussels or Strasbourg or wherever they decide their capital.
It's also worth mentioning, just briefly on that point, that, I mean, that Poland has a very, very healthy balance of trade in terms of, you know, exports kind of like exceed imports by a substantial, like it's like an 80 billion euro margin or something like that. I mean, but Poland does very well. Because the bulk of the bulk of that is imports. It's Germany, Russia, and China, and exports. Germany, massive exports to Germany.
Yeah,
actually.
Huge. One more thing I got to point out: there was a meme. Is it meme or meme? I can never remember. Meme.
Meme, just like Gene.
Meme. Oh, meme.
Me.
This meme floating around that I kind of think makes a good point, as memes often do. Remember going back a couple of years, Dr. Mike, to the previous fight about the judiciary here domestically, when the Polish left took Constitution as their kind of chant, their rallying cry, put it on T-shirts and placards and whatnot. You know, in other words, their point was the Constitution. It's right there written in the Constitution plainly that the government has these powers and not these powers, and they were arguing that what the government was doing in terms of the selection of judges was against the Constitution. So their rallying cry was Constitucja because it's right there. Well, now, when the tables are turned a little bit, suddenly they're not so big on the Constitution because the Polish Constitution plainly says that the Polish Constitution, as we mentioned before, takes precedence over the EU Constitution. And now people on the left in Poland suddenly don't want to talk so much about what's written plainly in the Constitution.
And I mean, Mike mentioned this earlier, but I mean, it should be repeated and emphasised that, you know, Poland is not even the first country to have a situation like this with the EU. In fact, Germany has had this very recently. I mean, the difference has been, according to one analysis I read, is that whilst Germany's Supreme Court or Constitutional Court ruled that Germany's constitution takes precedence, they were not going to actually act upon the ability to take. They never, you know, they kind of waved through whatever the EU regulation was, but said, like, just for the record, actually, Germany's constitution takes precedence. So. There's already history of this. I mean, one of the things that's interesting in a lot of the British media coverage that I've read is that they are almost universally kind of, and somewhat, I would say ignorantly, kind of dismissing peace of the Polish government in the way that every kind of Western media seems to, as like, lumped in with Hungary as, extremist, far right, populist, nationalist, blah, 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 blah. But then going on to say, well, yeah, but the EU is really, they've potentially screwed up bigger time than they have with the whole Brexit thing, because Poland is still inside.
Yeah, speaking of Brexit, Josh, wasn't the UK supposed to be starving and destitute by now after having left the club?
Oh, I don't know, because all of my relatives have died of starvation.
Yeah, I guess they have no electricity and no running water and all the rest of it. Check in on them and let us know how they're doing. Exactly. Let's move on
I'll
from
have to send a pigeon, because I don't think there's electricity.
Yes, exactly. If they have that even. They'll eat it when it arrives, by the way. Let's move on. Here's a topic. Let's bring things local here, very local here to Krakow. Here's a topic we've discussed many times on previous shows, and it's back in the news this week. That is, of course, the topic of a subway or an underground metro system, whatever you want to call it. There's been talk of this for a decade or more. Various studies have been commissioned to see how feasible it is financially, technically, and otherwise. And the people of Krakow had a chance to vote on it. How many years ago, Dr. Mike? Some time ago, I forgot.
I think it was in this century, but not 100% sure
voted
anymore.
it down. But the people who are pushing it, who it's only fair to point out, are financed by the construction companies that stand to make billions and billions of euros on this. They simply will not go away. And it's back in the news this week, Dr. Mike, with a kind of a compromise between what was originally proposed and maybe what's technically possible.
I mean, the city's kind of commissioned a feasibility study to know whether or not it was even doable, a subway, underground metro in Krakow. And if it was, what kind of version, how it would work. And a few months ago, the results came up, and now the city's been talking about it. And they basically said, yes, a full-blown subway system just in Krakow would not work. Considering population density, the way, people live in what areas, it just wouldn't work. So what was suggested was a new tram line on the northern part of town, going more or less from east to west, kind of like from west Krakow, then south to close to the older city, and then kind of back north and east to in the direction of Nowa Huta, so kind of like a U shaped in that sense. And this would be more of a tram line, which would incorporate about 22 kilometers in length. About a quarter of that would be underground, especially near the older part of the city. The rest would be on separate tram lines, or even on viaducts and elevated sections. This would still cost over 6 billion zlotys, so still a lot of money. And a lot of people are saying wait, this would cost a lot of money. It would not actually be a subway, so it wouldn't resolve a lot of these issues when it comes to traffic. Though I don't really understand why, because one of the main problems that trams have generally in town is that they're going through the center of towns, and if there's traffic, they're blocked as well. Because in a lot of places, they're at intersections, they have to deal with other buses and
yeah, in the center of town, they deal with the same.
So building a tram line which is independent from that infrastructure, because part of it is underground or part of it is elevated or to the side, means you could basically build a transportation line which is, you can count on that it will come every 5 minutes. Because it's not going to be blocked by traffic or at an intersection. So it kind of, I think it's the best of both worlds. It's a little cheaper than a full-blown subway system.
But why not just extend and do what they're doing now? Extend and expand the existing tram system. What's wrong with that?
They're doing that.
And they are. They're doing a good job of it, by the way, I have to say.
They're going further
especially
out,
on the north side of town, Azory, the more distant parts of Nowa Huta. The people on the south side of town still getting screwed, sorry. But yeah, the more people in Nowa Huta and Prądnik, Białe, Prądnik,
Czerwone. One of the main problems with that is they're extending the lines further out, but there's still most of them going through the center of town. And you're just sticking more trams going to the center of town, which only has a certain capacity. I mean, you can only stick so many lines on these tram lines, which also have to deal with car traffic. So extending these lines means more trams, and those trams, when they go through the center of town, get stuck.
I think that's a very good point. I mean, just next to Krakow's world headquarters is Stradom tram stop, which is one of the big kind of interchanges, and there's literally a tram. I mean, there's essentially 4 stops arranged around the kind of crossroads, and there's literally a tram at one of those stops all the time. So it's hard to imagine how you would manage to squeeze more trams, through. And it's for example, outside the main station, or the beginning of Lubitsch is another tram stop where there's always a tram at the stop.
Pretty much everything, the whole city, correct me if I'm wrong, it's kind of a wheel and a spoke system where, there's the periphery and every spoke brings it to the center, and then you kind of redirect to a different part of the wheel. I mean, there don't seem to be too many tram lines that connect two destinations that are both outside the center without
And I
going
think
through the
that's
center.
really what's kind of
Maybe we need stuff
needed,
that stays in the suburbs and never doesn't have to
And
go
that's what this
through the center of
proposed
town.
quasi-tram subway system would be. It wouldn't be directly connected with the trams. I mean, it would be the same technology. It would be a tram. It just wouldn't go on the same lines.
As I mentioned before, Dr. Mike, we've talked about this so many times on our show. Every so often there's a new proposal, a new variation, a new study. It gets turned down for whatever reason, and then it resurfaces. This is not going to go away. But the fact that the fact that so little progress has been made to this point tells me that the people who want to see it done are they're not acting on what I would call kind of financial or technical realities. They just want a subway because they want a subway.
Yeah, it's a flagship thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a badge, like, hey, I built
People
the
always
metro.
look at Warsaw. They say Warsaw has, Warsaw has twice the number of people we have. It's much more spread out
It's got,
geographically.
literally two lines.
And it was two lines, and it works. In all fairness, apparently the Warsaw metro system, and I don't know it that well, but apparently it's a godsend. It saves lots of people lots of time.
But
It's
I've heard
great.
that when you break it down financially, every ticket would have to cost about 20 zlotys to make sense.
But most people
Yeah,
don't
you see,
care.
that's very, very interesting. You see, what they need to do is to rebrand it. It's not a metro. It's not an underground tram system.
What is
it's
it?
a pipeline. It's a people pipeline.
Oh, I like
and
it.
then, then the EU money or
People
the Russian
pipeline.
money kind of starts flooding in.
I like it. I like
Tubes
it.
everywhere.
Pipeline.
Well, we'll no doubt be back on the topic of Krakow subways in a few months. Let's move on to this week. It's already happened in a few places, and any place that hasn't happened, it will probably happen in the coming days. We're talking about the price of gas per liter at gas stations all over the country. We are crossing the psychological barrier of 6 zlotys per liter. We are in uncharted territory here, unwelcome and uncharted territory, obviously. 6 zlotys per liter, Dr. Mike. This is a reflection not only of the larger economic issues that are forcing price hikes across the globe, but there's also taxes involved and things like this. This is exactly the kind of thing that creates problems for governments everywhere.
I mean, we all know that oil is basically the blood of an economy. So as soon as gasoline, petrol, fuel, gas, whatever you want to call it, increases in price, it causes everything to get more expensive because you move products around based on the prices of these of fuel, of energy. And winter's coming soon, so if gasoline is more expensive, then maybe they'll try to use other sources. So actual natural gas, which they increase the prices of heating homes or of
wind farms, right? Right, Josh?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
Solar panels.
Yeah.
No.
Prices have gone up though. It's I was driving off with my dad the other day around Katowice, Śląsk, and he wanted to tank up, and he drove to Makro, which is usually one of those places just like Walmart in the States that has a gas station up front, which is usually cheaper than anywhere else
Subsidized
because
a little
they're
bit, yeah.
bringing in customers. And we drive up there, it was like 601, and it was like, what the hell?
Yeah.
We ended up driving to, I think, a Shell or a BP, one of those like chain stations, usually more expensive. It was like 5.94, 93 on the Orlen on the freeway back to Krakow was also 5.93. It was cheaper than Makro, but I think Makro just screwed up. But yeah, those prices are basically hitting 6 right now. In some parts of the country, they're already over, and that's when it starts to get painful.
You mentioned Śląsk there, and I just wanted. This is completely irrelevant. I just wanted to interject this, but I was looking at the football results, and Śląsk Wrocław beat Wisła Krakow at Krakow's ground 5-0. Just the other day. So
Yesterday.
Things are still on the up and up as far as Wisła are
We
concerned.
haven't talked about them in a long time.
Not what we were talking about. I think they finally arrested that woman. Yeah, so it's like
About but going back to the gas for a moment, though, Dr. Mike, it's funny. You see this happening in America now. I'm sure it happens elsewhere. That people who are normally not political at all and really don't care who's in charge, suddenly, when you cross the psychological barrier per liter, per gallon, whatever, it gets attention, and gas prices can mobilize political forces. Maybe unlike anything else you can think of. It's amazing.
because it's one of those things that it affects the economy in a broad sense that all of a sudden everything you buy gets more expensive. Plus, on a day-to-day basis, you're driving around and all of a sudden you're trying to fill up your car and, it's, instead of being $30, it's 45, 50, 60. It's one of those things that you don't think about. Then all of a sudden you notice it's like $5-10 more.
Well, there's more good news in Poland for anybody who loves taxes, because we also learned that the taxes on alcohol and cigarettes are both going up, resulting in noticeable price increases from January of
Time to cut down on drinking petrol.
January of 2022. Guys, doesn't this go back to? You have to help me out here. There was some time ago. There was the announcement of some kind of EU. We're going back to the EU again, our favorite topic. Some kind of harmonization between the prices of things like cigarettes in every EU country. It cannot be significantly cheaper in one country.
This goes right back to Poland's accession, I think, in 2004. And the idea was that there would be, obviously it would be, totally unreasonable, unrealistic to immediately impose, let's say, German cigarette prices on the average Polish smoker. So the idea was that year by year there would be an incremental above the rate of inflation increase, so as that eventually over a period of time the prices would be in line. But I mean, I never really understood this because I mean, like in Spain, for example, cigarettes are massively cheaper than they are in Ireland or in.
Well, you mentioned Ireland. Is it fair for Polish consumers, given Polish incomes, to pay the same price for cigarettes as they pay in Ireland? What is it in Ireland? 12 euros, 15 euros a pack, maybe 20 euros a pack?
I have no idea.
It's whatever it is, I'm sure it's outrageous in Polish terms. How is that fair? So why should we have to pay the same for cigarettes just to harmonize the price? I mean, of all things they could focus on, why? Well, remember, this is the same EU that did nothing for COVID, by the way. Nothing for COVID relief, but they're going to step in on this issue of cigarette pricing. Dr. Mike?
Well, I don't think the Polish government is going to complain because, of course, this cigarette pricing, it's not like extra profit for the tobacco manufacturers, is it?
True.
It's all taxes, so it's all going into the
I've forgotten the number. We talked about this before. I think it's about 85 to 88% taxes.
Something like that. Yeah.
The retail price of cigarettes. So right now they're at 15, 16 zloty, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's an interesting one because I think if you go below a certain price point with cigarettes, because of that enormous tax or duty component, when you go below a certain price point, the actual physical material cost of the pack of cigarettes is in the order of a handful of groszy, which means that it is literally kind of sawdust that you're smoking.
So you're basically giving all the money to the government. I'm sure they do very smart things with that money, as they always do. Let me see how we're doing on time here. We got to wrap up pretty soon here. We've got a guest coming in. Let me mention quickly. Let's go back to the subject of Christmas. We learned this week that the city has concluded an agreement with a company that will provide and mount the decorations that we see all over the city during the holiday season for the next 2 years. The ones we see on Florianska, Grodzka, the Rynek. Where else do we see these things?
Well, they're basically all the main arteries around the city, plus on the bridges.
Well, here's the price, 4.5 million zlotys. That's, again, for the next 2 years. So just over 2 million per year. I'm good at math. I can do that. 4.5 divided by 2.
2.5.
Guys, just I don't know how much these decorations cost, but does that sound like it's in the right ballpark to you?
I think that's acceptable. I mean, mounting and preparing and everything like that for the city, and it's something that's, it sticks around for like 2 months, something like that. So like from the end of November till January. It brings up the mood, and the last 2 years, the designs they've had, they're nice, but they've basically been the same for like 5 or 6 years.
Do we have to use the word? I think installing might be better than mounting. I'm just getting this. I can see the headlines of
the word I needed.
Drunken revelers mounting.
No, you're right.
Christmas reindeer.
And you know what? Instead of the usual kind of generic, snowflakes and. What are the others? Christmas tree outlines and things like this. This year and next year, because again, the deal is for 2 years, we're going to get something a little interesting, something a little more upscale and a little more, what's the word I'm looking for? Something for the artistically inclined, classy. Apparently, the design motif that will be used throughout the decorations that we'll see all over the city, the design motif takes its inspiration from some of the tapestries inside Wawel. If you don't know, the Wawel Castle, known for its tapestry collection. Here's the quote taken
flashing
from
illuminated tapestry.
Here's part of the quote taken from the from the spokesman of the company that's supplying the decorations. He says that fragments of the tapestries are by an unknown artist from the circle of the Antwerp painter Peter van Eist, let's say. Now, Dr. Mike, do you feel better knowing that the city's money is being spent on fragments of tapestries from an unknown artist from the circle of the Antwerp painter Peter Van Eyck. Does that make it worth the money? In other words,
as long as they're blinking and they look nice, I'm fine with it. It's actually the tapestries in Wawel are quite famous, and we have actually never talked about this. It's right now is they're ending the first time in 100 years where they put up all the tapestries, because they only put up about 30% of the tapestries at any one time in the Wawel Museum, and it's every few months they take one down and put up another one. It's one of the few times right now where they had them all up, and it probably won't happen for another century. So we all missed that. But they're using,
because we did announce it on the news.
Exactly.
Obviously.
Yeah.
But using that as an inspiration. So, these are the Christmas lights going up in Krakow, and they're themed or inspired by the Wawel, which, also a part of Krakow's culture. I think it's quite suitable.
I think probably more realistically what happened is that they put the whole Christmas decoration thing out to tender, and amidst the shall we say, the vast ocean of rainbow themed and diversity box ticking exercises that were submitted by all the various hopefuls, and no doubt highly qualified people submitting, and of course because the evil government has certain views about these things, and they like, oh look, tapestries, a squirrel, there we go.
Forgot to include that also. The price also includes the massive mega Christmas tree that they set up in the northeast corner of the square, right in front of St. Mary's Church. So we'll have a Christmas tree as well.
That's something I hope they can change, because the last couple of years have been underwhelming, to put it mildly.
Really? Kind of a lame tree?
Well, we're not really been allowed out there.
Basically, they look. It's looked like a mall.
I wonder if the Christmas market's going to be back this year. That's a big deal, isn't it?
Oh yeah.
That usually starts beginning of December.
It lines up with Advent, so 4 weeks before.
Oh, okay. All right, squeeze in one more little last thing before we sign off here. We mentioned last time we did the news at the beginning of the month that Biedronka was jumping in the game of instant delivery to your home within 15 minutes or something like that. Now we learned that Żabka is following right behind them, 15-minute guaranteed delivery, which strikes me as odd because everybody in this country lives within 5 minutes of a Zabka. So unless you don't feel like getting dressed or whatever, I just don't see the point in 15-minute delivery from Zabka.
I think you just hit the nail on the head there, isn't it?
Yeah, okay.
It's going to take me longer to get dressed than it is to get out the door and around to the Żabka.
Can't be bothered.
For me, it's instant ordering from Zabka. I can see the Zabka from my window. It's across the street. And then there's another one around the corner, another one around the other corner. So within a 4-minute walk, I have access to 3 different Zabkas. If I need to grab something,
I checked mine. I live within seven Zabkas within 15 minutes of my place.
So unless it's a situation I don't have a dinner party, guests are over, need to grab something, or I can't leave the apartment because I don't have a broken leg or something along those lines.
It happens.
It happens.
What do you think I'm curious, what do you think the tipping situation is? You get out your app, you order some whatever from Żabka, somebody brings it. What's the tipping situation for something that costs you, I don't know, 10 zlotys? What
chewing gum.
What are you supposed to do?
Usually I don't tip in these situations.
Really?
Mainly because a lot of I'll be honest, I wasn't, the whole tipping thing in the U.S. pisses me off anyway.
It's not just in the U.S., it's here too. Come on.
It's here now, but only because it's artificially been brought in. The products that I'm buying should involve the cost of the labor involved with it as well. All
right, the guy standing at your doorway doesn't want to lecture on economic theory. He wants a goddamn tip, and you give him nothing. What about the pizza guy? You tip the pizza guy?
I might round up. That's it.
You cheap bastard.
Unless you're
Are you serious?
Yeah. But that's always been my approach to tipping.
Oh, my God.
For me, the thing is, the product I'm buying or ordering online with delivery involves the cost of delivery, which...
Maybe.
And the fact is, the tipping thing has only come in from American culture.
Stop blaming America. What is this? Tipping is not just an American thing. What are you talking about?
It was until.
What are you talking about? Josh, did you ever tip anybody in England when you were, I don't know, in your 20s?
Well, I remember.
I think you did.
I remember the first time as a family, we saved up enough money to go to a restaurant for a dinner, and my father explaining the importance to me that it was appropriate, provided the meal was decent and had been served properly, to add approximately 10% on top of the bill as a
brought
tip.
in from the U.S. Basically,
Jesus
that cultural concept of 10%, 50%. Now it's 20%. And that all started in the U.S. when they stopped paying normal wages to the employees and staff there. So it's like you go in and buy a pair of jeans at a store, and somebody helps you pick out those jeans. So you're going to tip that person as well.
I know the first time I had a restaurant meal in New York City, and I was looking at the price. I was actually, this is not bad. And then the people were saying, so it's going to end up costing around this. And I was like, doing the sums in my head, and I was thinking, well, that's about twice what it says on the menu, really. And then it was like New York state taxes, which is like massive, and that kind of humps it up a bit. And then there's, the 20% tip. And it was like, 20%? Are you serious?
Exactly. I just make the price 20% more instead of bothering me at the end. It's like, it's just about
you guys are creating a whole new podcast here. This is a totally different episode. How do we get here? All right. All right. Keep it focused. No mention of America. Josh. Pizza guy in Poland. Forget about the American history lesson. Pizza guy in Poland. How much do you tip? You round up? Do you
I don't think I've ever ordered a pizza delivery.
The wrong person to ask. Yeah. Oh my God. Okay.
The last time I ordered a pizza here was when we were watching the.
I would.
All right, we're going to do a tipping episode.
Okay, so if it was like $9.50, I don't even know how much a pizza costs. If it was $9.50, I'd give him 10 and keep the change.
What kind of pizza costs $9.50?
I don't know.
Jesus
It's been a while since you ordered.
Ask Ornstein. He eats pizza.
Oh my God! All right, well, we'll do an episode on tipping, I guess, at some point.
On Polish tipping.
We have to do this. Anybody who relies on tips for a living, please get in touch with us. Maybe you can come to the
studio.
Please
don't send me any hate mail.
Come to the studio and educate Josh on the price of a pizza these days. All right, thanks for listening, everybody.
Tips, that donate button mentioned.
The donate button, you can tip us. KrakCast.pl is the website, of course. Check out all of our back episodes. Later this week, we'll have a nice little language lesson. You can learn how to speak Farsi or Persian, so keep an eye out for that. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you later on the KrakCast.